You are all really, really welcome. Thank you so much for coming extra early before the dance for our little chat. You can just yeah, welcome to the Dance Bash. So, as you undoubtedly know, I'm lucky enough to be teaching Lindy Hop and Jazz here at Morley College every Saturday. It's my last plug, I promise. And I'm just really, really, really happy to be able to put on a dance here, and also, more than that, to bring great musicians, partly to play live, also who'll talk to us about playing for dancers. And also Martin, another dance teacher who's been much longer experienced than I am. But he did something really, really special recently, so I'm really glad that he's here to talk about it. Oh, now I'm louder. So,
it's your hormones.
Pete might not be invited for the whole evening, he might have to leave us at some point. Anyway, I will start, actually, if I may. We'll start with the dancing. Let's start with dancing, which means, Martin, I'll put you out of your misery first.
Thank you.
So Martin's been dancing since, like, early 90s.
Yes.
I think that's right, isn't it?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Right, I've done my homework.
Yes.
And teaching since 98?
98,
98,
yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah.
And you've learned from people, Frankie Manning, one of the original swing dancers.
So I saw Frankie a lot. Travelled a lot, Hurricane Dance Camp, etc. And the Swing Masters Jam in London, Brunel University, in the early 90s, mid-90s. Frankie used to come over. But my main teacher was Ryan Francois, who was Frankie's prodigy, really. Is Frankie's prodigy.
And so I was wondering what sort of changes you've seen over that time, if any. Are we still managing to be as further away we get from being taught by Frankie directly?
Are we moving away from?
Are we becoming modern Lindy Hoppers, or are we still managing? When we say authentic, how authentic are we? Okay.
It's difficult to say what is authentic, but there are people keeping the flame alive. Ryan is probably one of the main ones, and I hope that I'm trying to do the same thing. Years and years of watching Frankie dance socially, obviously we can watch films, How Was It Poppin', etc. But to watch him socially was very special, and one learns an incredible amount that unfortunately you can't now see. So we try, I guess.
I think that's an absolute, I think you hit the nail on the head there, because we have competitions which are filmed. We have a glut of competitions, one might say, and then these little snippets of film which we pour over and fetishize almost.
Mm-hmm.
And actually all we're trying to do is social dance
Yeah.
with each other. And as you say, we don't have so much, if any, footage of that.
That's right, yeah.
How do we not turn into competition ponies on the social dance floor?
Absolutely, yeah. And how does one spend long enough now to get to a point where you understand more? There's a pressure to learn and start teaching after 6 months or whatever. You know, there are organisations that push that, and how do you get to a point where you understand it, or you might think you understand it, but you don't. That's a fact. I wouldn't say I understand it yet. It's a learning process.
And is that partly understanding the dance and understanding music? We've got two things going on.
Absolutely, yeah. And coming around to the event that I'm here for, I've learned a huge amount. Much of it from this man here.
Which makes a good introduction.
It does indeed. Thank you.
You've passed the baton very, very nicely.
Sorry. Oh. Literally past the button.
Yeah. Welcome.
Hello.
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 So you have an awful lot of experience with recreating bands and particular concerts. Could you just give us
I came into this music in completely the opposite way that all of you must have done, because you've come into it because of the dancing. And I came into it because I was a spotty, lonely teenager with a saxophone. And I can remember in the good old days when we had proper programmes on the television, damn it, on a Friday night when I was a kid, I was getting into Glenn Miller, I had a saxophone, and they put Duke Ellington on the telly. And I'm still getting overcome thinking about it now, because all my switches got pulled at once in the way that I'm sure all you know only Duke Ellington can do. He was the master of manipulation, Ellington. But of course, rather than being attracted to want to dance to it, which was what most people are, I got attracted to want to play it. Because I've got shit coordination. A game of frisbee with me goes on for a month. So the only way I'm going to go to the party is if I can operate an instrument. So I completely fell in love with it. I fell in love with the rhythms of it, the sounds of it and everything. And much to the disappointment of my parents, because I come from a long line of bankers, I wanted to, it's true, I wanted to play the saxophone, and then later on, especially the clarinet, once I'd fallen under the spell of Benny Goodman a bit. And so I started off, strangely, as a young jazz musician, swimming against the grain of my contemporaries, because I started to start playing in the early to mid 1980s, and still by the early to mid 1980s, jazz as an art form was only looking forward. Okay, so I don't know how many of you were into contemporary 80s jazz, but the things that you were sort of allowed to listen would be Steps Ahead or Chick Corea, Pat Metheny, all that sort of stuff, and I didn't really have ears for it. What turned me on was Duke Ellington and Benny Goodman and Count Basie. Much to the pointing and laughing of my colleagues. But I sort of stuck with it, and eventually the Duke Ellington boil that had been welling up inside had to be lanced. Bon appetit. And so I had a job in the pit of the London Palladium, which paid quite a bit of money, playing very boring music every night. And I used that money to start up my Echoes of Ellington, just because I needed to play it. And then we were out playing our Ellington music because we loved it. It was also something else that's changed, that's made this revolution in swing dancing happen instrumentally in Britain, is that I wasn't the only musician to start going, wait a minute, jazz's got a great history. Why do we have to look forward all the time? Why can't some of us, I mean, it's great that some people look forward, because that's what a community has to do, but shouldn't some of us be curating the brilliance that's been? And by the mid-90s, I'd found some guys who are still kind of very much touched me, Colin Skinner, Jay Craig, you know, these guys, who are also the same outlook on it as I did. And so we started up this Ellington band, and we started doing Ellington gigs, and that's when my funny little world started to attract your funny little world. It was Ron Leslie, in fact, who was the first one out of your community who made himself known to me at a dance, not a dance, we were just doing a gig in the foyer of the Barbican, and all of a sudden, there's hundreds of people thrashing around what we were playing cotton tail. I was going, this is good, like this, because the brilliant thing about being a musician, swing musician playing for dancing, rather than playing a Glenn Miller concert in a theatre, is that the people who come to your gig in the theatre are generally now between 60 and 80, and they're coming to that gig because they're remembering their youth and when they used to have music with sex. And of course, it's true. And so, and because they're 70, bless them, they're going, oh, wasn't that lovely? I had a very moving experience doing this in a theatre in Stafford, in fact. Two Christmases ago, I was standing in front of the Sid Lawrence band because Chris Dean had married another woman or something and couldn't be there. And so I was directing his band for him, and there was this old couple, they're really old, 90s they were, 90s. I'm going to go because this makes me go, this thought. And it was a lovely old boy, and obviously ex-military, you know, buffed and tuffed and tash and the blazer and the gongs. and his old wife, and she was really quite knackered. She was in her 90s, but she was much poorlier than he was, and she couldn't really get out of her chair or any of that. But he was still very much on the go. And we're doing CDs in the interval, and he's come up and said, "Oh, it's absolutely marvellous, you know, Flossie and I are having a wonderful evening out, you know. We've been married 70 years and all this sort of stuff. And it's our anniversary next week." He said, "Oh, it's beautiful, you know." He said, "Will you play us Moonlight Serenade?" And I said, "Well, it's on the programme, sir. I'll dedicate it to you." Anyway, he started playing Moonlight Serenade for them, and the band was playing it beautifully. Because we have all these guys who are interested in the tradition, it sounded just like Glenn Bloody Miller. It was great. And the old couple just held hands and shut their eyes, because the music took them back to a time when she still was all on the go, and life wasn't just a load of disabled shit. And that's the power of it. And I'm not quite sure I ended up this cul-de-sac at a Lindy Hop chat, but there you go. But this is the point, is that this is the, you know, music can make all these magical things happen. But yes, that's what happens at a concert. So you get people reveling in their old memories. But at a Lindy Hop gig, what I love about it is that most of the people haven't got a clue what tune we're playing. They're not here for nostalgia. They're not here to read me record numbers of the original recordings and say, "Well, your clarinet soloist was playing an incorrect vibrato for the 1938 version," because we get people who do that. We get jazz train spotters. The reason you guys come to a gig is because you love the noise it makes. It stops it being nostalgic and it brings the music into the now. And that's why we learnt to play it. We didn't learn it as I was 15 in 1980, and everyone else was listening to Blondie, and I was playing Benny Goodman at Carnegie Hall. You know, I wasn't normal. And so I'm not doing this to remember some magical age. If I actually think about my youth and swing music, it's rejection and solitude. But the music had to be taken on at any cost. To answer your question?
Yeah, I like the idea that dancers, meeting the dancers seemed to complete the circle that you had done.
Yes, it kind of did. I mean, it's actually, I feel the circle's much more complete. Now, Martin and I are doing quite a bit of work together, and we're actually thrashing out between us, without realising maybe, some kind of policy with how this should work with big acoustic bands in proper acoustic dance halls. I mean, it's a bit crap really, isn't it? Because people knew about this in 1938 and then the truth got lost. It's not news, but I'm enjoying it more and more and more and more now, because we're getting it so right. We're learning about which cymbals to use, which brass instruments to actually buy, which mutes to buy and use. eBay is your friend with this, and so every time we do it, we get a notch closer. Because one of the reasons you think, oh, those old records, they sound all quirky and weird. Maybe it's because they were recorded on funny old gear, and it's not. It's because it actually sounded like that. I remember the first time Richard came in, my drummer, and he had a hi-hat cymbal, that thing. He came in with one that was this big. And instead of going like a model on it, it's going like the ones on the records. It sounds like that because it actually sounds like that.
Fantastic.
Again.
Let's come back to you, Martin.
Yeah.
Was it 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago?
Was it 2 weeks ago?
It's your overdraft.
27th of April.
27th, yes, that's right.
Oh, sorry, I should give you this.
So that's 2 weeks ago.
If there's anybody who didn't know that the Savoy Ball happened at Battersea Arts Centre, and this was your vision from how long ago?
So 2002 was the first Savoy Ball. Having said that, in the mid-90s, I was involved with a group of people who ran something called the Candlelight Ball at the new Connaught Rooms in Covent Garden. It was 95, I think. But that was more of a jump band we had there. But anyway, at that time I saw the Battersea Arts Centre, the Grand Hall, or shortly after that, late 90s, and thought I've got to run something here. And it was about 5 or 6 years later that I actually did. And it was the first Savoy Ball. In fact, Pete's band played there. Was that the 920?
It would have been the 920 Deluxe, yes.
It was. Acoustically, the hall was terrible. mean, beyond terrible. And we had all sorts of problems with the sound system, to the point that the following year we brought in a very expensive audio PA guy and all his kit. And but this was a red herring. It was a bad route to go down, and bad luck, I think, turned into good luck some 5 years ago when the venue had a disastrous fire. Luckily, no one was injured or anything like that, but the venue burnt down and it's been rebuilt with an amazing acoustic. I mean, the engineers, the architects have done a phenomenal job, and whether there are other halls that are that good around, I don't know, but certainly we've discovered a place that...
Certainly not one that big.
Not, yeah, indeed, because it is huge.
Walthamstow Assembly Hall has a green
Yeah.
acoustic. It was used for recording.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm sure there are, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But there's not many.
But there aren't, I don't think there are many. And certainly my experience has been that putting an acoustic band in somewhere is a risk. And it was still a risk until 2 weeks ago. It was quite scary. And in fact, very scary.
Yeah, but you felt your fear by putting 3 in at once, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, if you're going to mess up good times.
We should clarify for people, for anybody who wasn't there, or
Yes.
that you always play acoustically. In fact, don't you?
I tried to.
Yeah.
I tried to. If I had to play Duke Ellington music for a dance audience, it's not that popular actually for the dancers, A Night of Ellington.
No.
And I can explain why that is later if anybody's interested. But I would probably use a bit of amplification on an Ellington set. But certainly Basie, Goodman, Chick Webb, I'd imagine Lunsford wouldn't need it. Ooh. So, somebody's got to get the lasagna out of the oven.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just doing, in case anybody wasn't.
I'm old enough to have lost my train of thought.
Could I wake you up again?
Well, these people doing it.
But I have lost my train of thought. Where were we?
There's people in my lounge.
We're talking about the risk.
I like it, I'm scared.
I'll be going to see one of your sit-down concerts.
We were talking, I'm just going to leave. We were talking about the risk of putting on, well, anything that Pete does really.
So we sort of tempered the risk a little bit by having Pete come in with a quartet.
Yes, that was interesting, wasn't it?
Which was really interesting. And when we came in, the first thing Pete did was to blow a couple of notes, and we had a little bit of an echo coming back. At which point I remembered that they had these baffles in the roof. And I said to Jack, the sound guy, can we bring the baffles in? Do you have to get up there with a very long ladder or a cherry picker or something? And no, it's all electric. So press the appropriate buttons and the echo disappeared very nicely. So Pete and a few guys played a couple of numbers, which stupidly I didn't record. So we never got that sound check out to show people. But what we did do after that was Pete played a couple of chorus or two, and we put that up on Facebook, I think, just to show that actually it was sounding good. But we went around the whole hall and it sounded good everywhere. So yeah, we had a bit of confidence, but that's different to having 35 plus musicians on the stage. So I did what I could. We had to hire in everything really, but including the piano. I went for a fairly flash piano.
You really did.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Fazioli grand concert piano. It's like a 400 piano. It's worth about 300 grand or something.
Yeah. Got in the van all right after, didn't it?
Yes.
Give it a couple of years to, get it out again.
We needed something that would cut across the whole hall with a lot of people in there. So that was what we went for. And,
but
it worked out really rather well.
It's interesting though, this whole acoustic thing at dancing actually came to run my way through Ryan, putting on his gig at Guildford, which I can't remember what it was called now. Pardon? It was Camp Savoy. And he got me in to play the saxophone with Casey McGill. Who's heard Casey? Yeah, and you really can hear Casey, can't you? He stands there playing a ukulele with no electrics. And there was, 500 people dancing, and all I could hear was feet. And he said, it's fine, you just play quieter. They'll lean in, bass player had no amp. It's the first time I'd done it, and all of a sudden there's all air around the music. It wasn't this hideous, contorted, electronicized, frequency bollocked about with version of itself. It was the actual proper cooking. And I thought, well, that's the way for me. And Casey is a world-renowned, big dance attraction, isn't he? Put Casey on, people come. And Casey's really quiet. He'll sit here and play about this loud. And it was very interesting at your ball because something happened that I've not seen before, which was very, very authentic. And it's just a natural human thing. And it's that because you can hear it crystal clear, a band with no amplification, for a strange physical reason, which I can explain in a bit. But what was happening was, I've seen photos of this, when you see the pictures of Harry James's band or somewhere, or Benny at the Palomar or whatever, these big, famous, iconic pictures of swing bands, is that there's lots of people dancing, but there's people gathering 3 deep at the stage who just want to jig about and listen to it, because if you stand right in front of it, you get the full sonic picture. And you can hear enough at the back to dance, but if you really want the Rolls Royce racket, you have to get right up the band's nose for it. And every time I've been in an amplified band, of course, if you go up the front, it's fucking loud, so no thanks. But it's all warm and fabulous and detailed at the front. And it was happening at your gig. It's the first time I've seen that. People just standing like that. And chucking fishes at them, you know. A bit of a Jesus complex. It comes to me so on my own as a kid. But, no, I didn't do the fishes. Just to be clear, no fishes were harmed in the making of this programme. But no, it's amazing. And what I'd like to do, because I now can see how that would work, if we did Basie and Chick again in a room that size, you could actually have them play simultaneously. Because that's what they did in the Savoy Ballroom. The bands played simultaneously, and the battle was won by who drew the most people over. So there'd be a weird zone in the middle where you'd hear all of it. But I'm sure, I mean, even if we did it for 20 minutes just to see what it was like, you know.
I know they used to play the same number when they handed over.
Yeah, change up and stuff. That's quite common. It's a good effect.
Yeah.
Yes.
How did you decide which bands to emulate?
So
That's history. Do you want it?
Yeah, because I'll start it. So we knew we were going to run the Savoy Ball again. We'd been speaking to the venue for 3 years or so, or 2 years at that point. And where were we when you suggested to me?
Was it when we were in prison?
You said it
It's only a little fraud. It's all right. I came home at weekends.
Say a year ago.
Yeah, I think it was a year. It's nearly healed as well, so I think it was about a year ago, yeah.
I can't even take the mic away from you.
I'm a nightmare, baby.
Anyway, at the end of a 10-year stretch, we were discussing the Savoy Ball, and Pete suggested 1938, January 16th, was a very, very big day in swing, and that he thought that the musicians wanted to do this thing, which was to run the Benny Goodman Carnegie Hall concert, followed by Count Basie versus Chick Webb at the Savoy Ballroom, which tied in so well with resurgence, the bringing back of the Savoy Ball.
Yeah.
And so that's how the idea happened.
It's just history. And of course, we do live in enlightened times, so you can get enough musicians who can play the style. And also, because of the internet work, it is possible to get hold of the music now. You know, when I got my Ellington band together, me and 2 of my friends had to sit down with the CDs as they were then, writing it all out. It took ages. Now you can buy it for 20 quid a pop. So it made it very much easier to do that.
And the Chick Webb charts are
Yes.
available from the States. There's a group of people who have diligently transcribed all, and they're doing Lionel Hampton now. It's not cheap, but it is available, and people's impressed.
Oh, yeah. No, but it's cheaper than paying someone to do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what it cost you to get all of that
Yeah.
would cost you to pay someone to do one.
Yeah.
So it's you know, it's...
So yes, it is available there. And Lunsford is next, and I'm sure they've got others planned.
That'd be good.
Are they all composed through, or do you have spaces for improvised solos?
They are all composed through. You can stretch them if you're playing them for a listening audience, but a dance audience gets a bit tetchy if it's more than 3 minutes. I don't know why, because the next one you play sounds exactly the bloody same. I don't know what's the matter with all of you.
We get to change partners.
Can't you just do that? Do we have to stop for that to happen?
No, I know, actually.
Do we have to stop? Because it doesn't happen in other genres of club music. You know, if you just go down the old place, they've just got the bloody tumble dryer on next to the mic. And, you know, I don't know. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So we tend not to. And if you listen to those bands playing for dancers, they tended not to, because the convenient thing about the 78 RPM record, which is one of the things that started all this, being up to 3.5 minutes long, is it seems to coincide with a very natural human attention span. You sort of had enough of one thing after 3.5 minutes, you know. Anyway, oh crikey,
Any improvised solos?
back in the room. So improvised solos, yeah, those arrangements have windows for them, but this is why Duke Ellington music tends to be less effective on a Lindy Hop audience, less effective, not ineffective, but less effective, a whole evening of Ellington, than, unless you're a nutter like Sally, than Benny Goodman, for example. Often I've done a weekender up north or something, and they booked the band for 2 nights because they could save a bit on train fares and hotels. So we just come and do. I cut my bit of deal on the fees and all that. Any promoters out there? And so it's Duke Ellington and Benny Goodman, because that's what I had at the time. And the big Ellington numbers, Perdido, A-Train, Rockin' in Rhythm, everyone loves them. But the interesting thing about those tunes is that they are not really typical of Ellington, because if you listen to Duke Ellington music, quite a lot of it is one person playing with the trio. And so if you are doing that acoustically in a big hall, we don't really hear much. The clever thing about Benny Goodman, well, it's not Benny Goodman, it's Fletcher Henderson who wrote all his stuff. The clever thing about Fletcher Henderson is at all times in a Fletcher Henderson composition, one of the 3 sections in the brass team of the band is playing a very rhythmic figure in harmony. So as long as you hear that and the drums, you've got a full enough picture of music to make you go, oh fuck, you know, some of that. So that's kind of how it works. At Ellington, it's much cleverer, and there's a lot of improvisation, and it's great to listen to, and funnily enough, it sounds pretty good when you hear it on the pumped up stereo. But if you're trying to do it, you've got to do it in a small room with a low ceiling. Then it's very effective. But it was very interesting hearing the Basie versus the Webb from a musical point of view, because they were both very successful dance bands. And they both have this Fletcher Henderson kind of idea that something in the band is going in harmony, and everything is nice, isn't it? And then something else is happening as well. But as we were chatting, it sounded very much, when you heard them side by side, that Chick Webb's music is quite clearly from a dance band tradition, and Basie's is from a jazz tradition. And at the actual Savoy Ball in 1938, the dancers preferred Webb, was the feeling of the night, wasn't it? And the feeling of our lot was they preferred the Basie.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I can vouch for the fact that our 2 bands were of the same quality. There's no, but the Webb stuff just sounded a bit corny a little bit, didn't it, in the context of all that hot Basie stuff to my ear.
Everybody I talked to that was there felt that the Basie band had won the battle.
Yeah, we had better bullets.
Yeah, I think that the 2, and the dancers used to prefer Basie, as I understand it.
Really?
Yeah, as I understand it.
The history
Webb was
book
the
tells me.
house band,
Right.
and so there were politics involved.
But the other gig, for anybody out there who's interested in this geeky stuff, the other gig on January the 16th, 1938, which I would have loved to have heard, which we'll never be able to recreate because it completely depends on the personal stylings of the musicians, is that Benny Goodman, when he did his Carnegie Hall concert in the evening, had Count Basie and quite a lot of his band there as extra support. He'd bring them on for solos and stuff. I don't know if you got the record, but Basie and his main soloists and his rhythm section, apart from Joe Jones, the drummer, were at Carnegie Hall with Benny filling in here and there. But Basie's band had a gig. And so what happened was that Ellington went and led Basie's band and took his sidemen to fill the gaps in Basie's band. So it was Duke Ellington and Ben Webster playing Jumping at the Woodside. It would be like smoked salmon and beans on toast. It would be fascinating. But, so that's the gig I'd really like to have been at, really.
Were there any surprises when you actually played, either whether musically or the response?
Yeah, I was surprised that the bassy stuff sounded so much firmer than the Webb stuff. I was expecting it to be the other way around.
Oh, right.
I was expecting the bassy stuff to sound familiar and a bit tired, and the Webb stuff to not. But of course we had to limit ourselves to what is known as Old Testament bassy. So no splanky, no shiny stockings, no corner pocket, none of that. Had to be the old 30s stuff, and it really, really goes, doesn't it? Oh, Upton meter.
I think A-Train was the latest, wasn't it? Of the
A-Train was Cottontail, actually, probably.
Oh, Cottontail.
1941, 42, somewhere like that. C-Jam. But
That was the post-battle sort of little extra.
Duke Ellington's. It was 120 as well, so that was nice.
Yeah.
What about you, Martin?
Well, the acoustic,
Right.
honestly. I mean, I went up on the balcony and I was, as a promoter, obviously I had to make a decision about, ticket prices and that, and I charged more for balcony and gallery seats on pretty much on the idea of being a little bit exclusive and up there, but I feel justified because the sound up there was incredible and probably similar to the experience of being right at the front.
Yeah.
It was just incredible. I've not heard anything like it.
No, me neither.
I was absolutely blown away. And I think I understood what Frank used to go about this wonderful music at the Savoy Ballroom. I've heard enough big bands, but I've not heard that.
Yeah, but that's the important thing about it. Here's the interesting acoustic fact, and why an acoustic band will always sound better than an amplified one, as long as you're listening to it. And it's something I read somewhere, as a part of your brain and how it experiences sound. And we all know, don't we, if we're in a restaurant or at a party or something, and we want to listen to what they're talking about over there, all right, we can do this, okay? You can do it, can't you? You can zone out all the other conversation and listen, especially if you're really nosy. It's funny that the adjective of this is nosy and not eerie, isn't it? But there you are. If you're really nosy, you can do it. And so if you apply that to a musical ensemble, an orchestra, for example, where there's never any amplification, it's possible for you to zone in on one instrument in the orchestra, or like, so if it's a big band, you can listen to the bass and drums, but you might want to listen to the trombones. As soon as you put one amplifier on the stage, you stuff all that up, because an amplifier emits a specific set of frequencies and not the whole range, okay? It's why a big band live, you can't get the same sound as you can on a record. You just haven't got a speaker system advanced enough to do it. An amplifier will stuff it up. One will stuff it up. And all of a sudden, your ear cannot roam around the band and hear anything it wants anymore. It will hear what the amplifier throws at it. And so you because you can't hear everything clearly, all of a sudden you start thinking you can hear nothing. So then you start turning other things up, and until you've got these electric things making your oral decisions for you. And although it's much louder, it's much more claustrophobic. I don't know if any of you have been to a Jules Holland gig. I used to be in Jules's band. I mean, it was the acoustic equivalent of being mugged. It's so loud you can't hear anything. You're aware of an awful lot of noise, but you can't actually, it's like standing on a building site, And it's that phenomenon. Interestingly, I had a battle of the bands years ago with Paul Lacey's band. I had my Benny band, and it was in the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester, which is a big 2,000-seater room. I don't know if you know it. Massive, great hall. It is perfect acoustically because they spent gazillions on it to have beautiful orchestral concerts. It is flawless acoustically, but these acoustic concert halls, classical ones, can sometimes not be to our favour in our music. So we had the two bands on stage, took the toss. Lacey lost, I put him into bat. And his band sounded like shit. I was thinking, that's funny. I know all those lads, they were brilliant. And he's playing Count Basie music, later period, New Testament. But all the same, he had a really good band playing really good music in a really great hall, sounded like a big muddy load of crap. So I thought, it's just the way the hall is, we're going to die, you know. And we went on out, I counted off Don't Be That Way, thinking, hard hat and safety tabard, here it comes. Sounded beautiful and crisp. Couldn't fault it. We sounded amazing. And then I looked over and I noticed his bass player had a little tiny amp. Little tiny wee one. This big. And it made a bollocks of his whole band. They are amazing, what they do and what they don't do. If we're coming out to do an Earth, Wind and Fire night, there'll be amps everywhere. But, you know, for our stuff, none. Yes?
Yeah, you've been talking about the sound, which is very important, but also I think you are being very instrumental making your band very exciting, because you've got like very good technically musicians.
Yes.
Certainly play nearly every night, and they can get complacent, but you manage to put some excitement in there, and it just adds another dimension, which is quite rare, and that's great. I think moving forward, I can't see many bands who've got that ability to go from 30 miles an hour to 200 miles.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm very expensive. No, well, it's just, as I said when I was a kid and I saw Duke Ellington on the telly, I mean, Duke Ellington is still my man, and it pulls all my switches. And I think whatever you're leading, whatever business you're leading, if you want it's got to really excite you, else you're not going to be able to excite anybody else unless you're excited, are you? We all know this. So,
do you feel that the feedback that we as dancers give you has got a very good influence?
oh, it's brilliant, yeah.
I find that very often we dance and we finish the dance and we say thank you and everything, and we kind of forget that there's actually a band there that's giving us a lot of things.
No, well, we don't.
No.
No. If you see that, I like any gig. I've got a funny old. This is a bit mad. I've got a funny old thing I think of with a gig, whether it's a concert or a dance. But I imagine at the back of the room there's a huge, great granite wheel, and massive. Sometimes you can only see half of it. So like a great big mill wheel, you know. And as the energy of the gig gets going, the granite wheel starts to go round. And after a while, we've all been at gigs like that, it gets to such a momentum, it doesn't matter what we do, everyone's going to go bananas, because the energy in the room is way up, because the granite wheel is now unstoppable. Now,
that's when
one of the things that gets that big granite wheel going round and round is a floor full of people all going bananas. We don't need to be clapped. We can get the energy straight off the floor. And I was quite touched once. My lead alto player I use a lot looks like Alfred E. Newman, and he's called Calamity Nige. Calamity Nige, we did a series of gigs up in Leeds at the university there in the refectory, which is a really great room to play acoustic swinging. And he rang me on the way home going, that's the reason I learned. He said, I can't believe it. He said, I've been playing a load of shit for 30 years, and that's why I learned to play. So, to answer your question, yeah, it's great. And it's an energy unlike any other. And it's the proper energy for the music.
I think there might be another factor, I might be wrong, but I remember Pete asked me before the ball, about tempos.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, play the tempos that the songs are written for. Don't play for dancers.
No.
And I think that's the right way to, and it should be the way going forward. Because if you start trying to accommodate, what's right. What's right to me is how the song is written, and the dancers will rise to that, and that's where the part of the energy comes from.
But I don't know, part of my feeling about the history of British Lindy Hop is the acceleration and deceleration of the dancers, because when it got a bit Charleston-y, didn't it, about 4 or 5 years ago? And so all of a sudden we're all going, you know, for you. Because we're tarts, we don't mind, we just want the money. And then sometimes, then all of a sudden we're all back down to 120 beats a minute. And now there's Balboa, so you can do about 160, 175. And then if I see Big Sam on a gig, I know I can play one number at 310, and he'll be hurling Sally round. But I also think that this happens in any kind of club dance music, doesn't it? The acceleration and deceleration of the fashionable tempo. So if you look back along the original swing era, things were pretty fast in 1938, and then by sort of 1944, when you got stuff like Opus 1, it's gone back to do-vi-do, hasn't it? But late 30s, you got, you know, Lunsford Special, all kinds of crap.
So I would say that each generation of Lindy Hoppers, which is probably around 4 or 5 years, wants to do things their way. And fads come in and out, and the hot jazz Charleston kind of feel 4 years ago was one of those fads. Neo-swing was another one that came along in the late 90s and was about 4 years in the doing.
Was that then? Was that then?
Then?
The cherry poppy and daddies?
Oh, yes, I know. You know, people go with it because they're young and they you know, it's the thing. But for Lindy Hop, big band music is where it's at, I think. And, you know, it does come back to that. And I think we're coming back to that now, actually.
Things have to change in order to just keep people's interest, I guess, because what we're talking about is music of a very small period in time, but we're now dancing it for so much longer.
This kind of comes back to Frankie and Norman, of course, and keeping the roots, the essence there, because new dancers will try and take it somewhere else. I'm sure with the musicians it's the same. And someone needs to be there going, hold on, there's this. This is where it's from. You know.
Which is often the spirit of it. If you keep the spirit, I find is it that balance between being respectful and being authentic in that as much as possible, and also allowing a new creativity. Otherwise, you to stop just sort of going round and round in circles, and allowing whether it's a new improvisation.
I don't think the picture of it is like that. No, I don't think it's linear. I think there's everything out on the table, and you can choose where you want to go. I don't think when we were doing Martin's Savoy Ball that we were being very geeky about it. We'd spent a lot of time and frankly money getting all the stuff together, but there was no big sitting up all night with the anoraks done up to here, worrying about, you know, what sort of tie my third trombone player needed to wear. There was none of that. We just went and had the music and had it in front of a load of people who wanted to have a great time, which is exactly what it's meant to do. And then people sort of find their way in and out of it, don't they? And, you know, I'm very proud to stand for that.
I guess there is a question of whether new compositions could come along that...
Has anyone done it?
Well,
should we ever go?
Can I just ask something about, like, you're saying about new compositions, and you were saying about playing the music as it was written, not trying to play for dancers. Well, I saw your gig when you did Holst, and you made it swing.
Oh, yes.
Would you not consider putting some of that into a set for dancers? Because I thought some of that was really danceable. So you said about new compositions, you've got it, you've done it.
If people wanted to do that, there's a lot of things about, I mean, that was written in the style of Billy Strayhorn. There's a lot of things about that kind of writing which stops people wanting to dance. It's very dissonant.
I wanted to dance.
Good for you.
Right.
You come up my treehouse at Christmas.
No, but
He's a ballet dancer.
But
me and Nick, some of the best dances are when we and Nicky have been out. And when we've been out and we've danced to bands that weren't there for dances. We hadn't gone to a dance event. We'd just gone to see them play it.
That goes back to what Martin
yeah,
said.
but I think that's great. I think that's also quite exceptional. I mean, having played a lot of big band dance music, you can recognise certain things coming up in an arrangement. You go, this is going to get them, and sure enough, it does. There's certain things, certain devices you can look at which will speak very broadly to a very large amount of the audience. I mean, it's brilliant. You want to dance to My Planets, and we'll have a chat afterwards, and maybe put something together for the television. But everybody you could dress up as a different planet, couldn't you? A big papier-mâché Saturn. Yeah, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? Nice lace coming out the bottom.
I think if you're going to innovate with the dance, for example, you need to understand what came before and be at a point where, and this is going back to, is there anyone now that does? But if you get to that point where you do, obviously Ryan and the likes, then they can innovate.
I certainly think you could write a load of swing music that would sound just like the old stuff and not be old. I mean, I would say that bassy set I played, I didn't know 14 of them. We just counted them off and played them. The band was sight reading, so nobody knew how it went. Nobody in the room knew how tipping on the QT or digging for decks went until after they finished being played. So you could actually quite easily have slipped in, I don't know.
Fake.
Yeah, this is a new one I've written called Kilburn Park. Nobody would bloody know this.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, but I have an album coming out actually in the later on in the year with my ex-fiancée Georgina, the singer, and we have tried to make an album that anybody who's never heard swing or jazz before would love. It's a 20-piece band and a girl singing. And I'm going to sneak some on the DJing later. It's proper swing. I'd say if you were going to put it in a time frame, it would be in the early 50s in its outlook. But I've made it as big and as brassy and as rhythmic as I possibly can. And I would like to think that if that doesn't turn you on, you haven't got a switch. And not you personally, madam, I'm sorry. I was just looking that way. Anyway, that's the end of the advert.
Well, almost in the same vein, I wanted to ask Martin, where, you put, as you say, 3 bands together on one night. Where do you go from there? How do you follow that? 4.
Excellent. No, we're not doing 4. Say it again. Who was there? Who was it? Oh, I lost you. Wow. Do you want it again?
Yes.
Do you want the same again? Do you want different bands? I mean, I don't mean different bands as in different musicians.
Different repertoire.
But do you want a different repertoire? Do you want Lunsford?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, talk to me.
You see, up in Norfolk, I used to do a lot of ballroom work in a Pontins holiday camp at Pakefield. Don't laugh! It's a dancer's paradise. You know it. Low ceiling, dance floor for 1,000 people, cheap digs. Watch this space.
Yeah, it's a good room.
In terms of the survival, I'm sure it will happen again, but because, well, it was scary this time, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And all those things that were causing the fear have been answered. So it will be a lot less scary next time. But we need to know that people want it, that they recognise the value of it, I guess, is one thing. Yeah. But it will come.
Great. Can I bring the discussion in a bit, as it were?
Right.
And we don't normally we have a dance. We either put on the records or the musicians come in, and everything just starts and it all goes. We don't often have the chance to sit down with you and talk to you about who are the guys you've got coming tonight? What should we be listening to? How does it all work? How does it all fit together?
I don't really know who half of them are. No, well, we're going to play you a little band called the Pocket Basie tonight. This is the Count Basie repertoire of all basses eras, reduced for budgetary reasons from 17 to 6. It is the lowest common denominator of the Basie band we can do, so we have to keep the rhythm section intact. You have the proper Basie rhythm section of acoustic guitar, acoustic piano, acoustic double bass and drums, and then instead of the 3 rows of brass instruments, 1 trumpet and 1 saxophone. And we feel it gives you the flavour of it, if not actually the full portion. Yeah, so that's what you're going to get. Interesting thing about what did Count Basie achieve in terms of the history of swing? What Count Basie achieved in the terms of the history of swing is quite crucial, because it was Basie's band that first laid out the roles for the instruments in the rhythm section as they are today, as they have been since 1935. It was Basie's band that first moved the piano away from playing the bass line. All through the 20s, when things were clankier, the piano had to play the bass line along with the bass. And you see, if you go to Benny Goodman's band a bit later, the piano player's still doing that. The piano player's still going ching, ching, ching. It's quite clear. On the end of the studio recording of Don't Be That Way, I'm sure you're all very familiar with it, you hear Jess Stacey on the piano going bong, 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 bong on the piano. Basie would never do that. He'd just let the bass go. He'd go clink, 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 clink. The other thing is because he's got the guitar right up the front going on top of the bass, there's nothing much for him to do. So he embellishes the harmony and the rhythm just gently on the piano and then lets the blowers get on with it. So the whole idea of the Basie band is the rhythm section is this kind of big, they used to call it the rubber ball, and it's a really great analogy. Doink, 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 doink. And that's what gives Basie its clout. So after Basie, everybody had the 4 instruments of the rhythm section occupying those roles, and if you listen to earlier jazz, it's a bit muddy sometimes. Quite a lot of the times there isn't a bass. If I do a Benny Goodman quartet, I don't need a bass, I just have Colin Good in his iron left hand, because that's what happened back then. Basie had the first ever kind of smooth rhythm section, modern one. And of course he had some incredible soloists. He had Lester Young, the Picasso of the tenor sax, who made everything linear, groovy and cool, and Buck Clayton on the trumpet, who did a pretty similar job on his instrument. So we're going to do our best for you with all that lot on this money. You've just got into the black, haven't you? I'll do you a deal.
Yeah, I thought it was 5 years.
Do you think there's 5 of us? 5. Oh,
Anyway.
I'll charge you for 5. I'll do it for 3. I'm not in this for the
None of us are. It's all a bit squidgy.
Very good job.
I wait to throw it open to the audience. Was there anybody who had a question for either Martin or Pete? I know that people have been speaking.
Hello, Richard. This is my drummer, Richard. This is the swing Q&A.
That was the perfect entrance. That was the perfect time. Gents on the left.
Yeah, come round. You can ask us anything you like.
Yes, hello.
Yes.
You talk about one piece being written for a certain tempo. And it brought to mind for me that Billie Holiday singing Go Along My Heart, and then the Boiler Room Jazz Band playing that without just the instrumental, much higher tempo. For me, they just work. It's dancing. There's such a different kind of rendition. You've got the one with the soulful kind of sad singing, and the other one's just a jolly dance together.
They both do. I think what Martin was alluding to, though, is something like, let's say Swingin' the Blues by Count Basie. And that piece goes pretty fast. It's at about 270 if on the original record, 250 maybe. And I think where we were going with that was if you want to hear Swinging the Blues played in the pre-war bassy way on a big band, we kind of have to do it like that. But of course, with an old jazz standard like that, there's a million versions at a million different tempi, and they all work. But we're actually kind of talking about recreating a performance on a record.
Yeah, and those
Slightly
bands,
different thing.
those bands are playing it the way they want to play it, is my point.
Oh yeah?
Not, the dancers can't cope with that tempo, so can you slow it down a bit? That's what I was trying to get at, is playing it the way the band want to play it, not the way they've been told to because, you know, dancers want it at this tempo. Because frankly, if you know, there are 30 songs on the sheet and one's too fast for half the dancers, they should just sit out and actually look and listen to the band for that one.
So you're talking about in the room at the time?
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
yes, not in general. Yeah. Yeah,
That's
no,
all right.
I'm
It's
talking
a very good
about,
point.
you know, one song having to be played one way. Not at all. No.
Anything else? I know a lot about Spitfires.
He's dying to talk about Spitfire.
I found out something terrifying about Spitfires just like yesterday, because I've got my first gig doing Spitfires tomorrow at the Cadogan Hall. There's an RAF Benevolent Fund gig on with the Sid Lawrence Orchestra. I'm playing a bit in the band, but mainly I'm curating a collection of model Spitfires in the lobby. Very excited about that. So I was mugging up on my Spitfire history, and of course they're all made in Castle Bromwich, which means that the Spitfire, the defender of our nation, the thing that stood between us and the Nazi menace, all the Spitfires were Brummies. Oh, here's Richard. How did it go?
That was very nice.
Well, I'll hold the question out to you. Why was the Spitfire the only aircraft that was used at the RAF at the start of the war and also at the end of the war?
Because of the design flexibility in it envisaged by the sub-designer Joe Smith after R.J. Mitchell died. It was a very flexible design, and the wing, being a certain shape, had a very high Mach number, and the Spitfire could be dived the quickest out of any of the Allied fighters in the war. It became obsolete very shortly after the war with the introduction of the jet, but soldiered on in the Auxiliary Air Force till 1952, and the last Spitfire, a PR-19, flew an operational mission out of RAF Seletar in 1958.
But you wouldn't have fitted in a Spitfire.
I can. I'm going up in one this year, thank you. That is a bit of a squish, you're right.
You're more like a Hurricane.
The Hurricane's much roomier for the pilot of the fuller figure. It's all the look this season. Yes?
On the subject of the war, talking over the late 30s, the hot time of creativity. So in that transition from the first half of the 40s to 45, was there a lot of mass movements and changes, so much going on? Did that have a huge impact on the development of jazz music?
Oh, man, yeah. And unfortunately, because of a recording ban in 1942, the whole transitional period, 42 to 44, halfway through 40, is lost. It's just not there. Loads of things were happening. I mean, apart from the fact you had the war and the big commercial bands were suffering from the draft, and singers were becoming more prominent. That was kind of a big cultural change. The music itself was modernising. I mean, music always modernises. But since, people say after the war they came back and all of a sudden everyone was playing bebop, it's not the whole picture. Bebop started in about 1930. You can hear Gene Krupa with, I think it's Red Nickel, oh, he'd know, but playing ride cymbal in about 1931. And it's amazing, Max, it's an old recording of China going, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, gangadung, 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 and you go, fucking hell, what's going on? Because all of a sudden it jumps 20 years into the future and then back again. And of course it was Basie who kind of then wrote the code for this. But Lionel Hampton turns up in Benny's band in the late 30s. he's playing very much more what we call chromatically. So rather than being white notes at the piano only, it's white notes and black notes at the piano. And so the music gets harder to sing and hear. Hampton's doing it. Charlie Christian turns up in Benny's band shortly after, and Lester Young's over in Basie's band, and they're changing the way it sounds. Now, out in the territory bands, there's a kid called Charlie Parker playing in a sweet band, not very effectively, but he is practicing 14 hours a day, and he can hear all this stuff inside out. And so he appears in New York in Jay McShann's band in 1940, I think. And if you want to really freak yourself out, you might know the record. There's a record called Jump in the Blues by Jay McShann. Lindy Hoppers would love it, you know it.
Yeah.
But there's this one chorus of alto saxophone in the middle, and it's like you go into space. It's just beautiful, and it's from a different planet. Because Charlie Parker was. I think he was just shoved here to show us all the way. There was, in Ellington's band, there's Jimmy Blanton playing modern double bass in 1940, Jack the Bear, Go-Go, those great things. And then, unfortunately, at the time, and Dizzy was playing for Cab Calloway. So all of this, and they're all meeting in Manhattan. Manhattan is key to this because all these people are in an area the size of East Croydon. You know, and one of the reasons the development was able to happen in Manhattan at that time was simply because no one had to drive anywhere. Gillespie was saying when he was sort of 20 or 21, so he's working with Teddy Hill, he would then go, after work, he'd go up to the Savoy and dance. Gillespie was a great dancer. One of the reasons his rhythms are so great is he's a great dancer, same with Lester Young, who was a cabaret dancer when he was a kid. I don't know if you knew that. And Dizzy, then he'd do that, but then he'd go out and hang out on the roof of the Savoy with Nat Cole, who later became Nat King Cole, but then he's just Nat Cole, he's a great piano player, and that would show Dizzy all new classical harmony on the piano. And Billy Strayhorn was hanging around. There's some weird bits of, there's a thing called Midriff by Billy Strayhorn. He wrote for Ellington, recorded it in 1945, and it's got a release in it that sounds exactly like something Dizzy wrote at the same time. So there's a lot of hanging out going on. You can hear they're all into it and thinking together. But all these geniuses, Charlie Parker's on the island, everyone's on this little tiny island, and everyone's playing all the time. There was enough work, so everyone had chops of concrete, and they were utterly match fit. Plus, no one's spending, like I have to do, 8 hours a day in a motor. They're all just there, working all the time and hanging out. And then they go to Minton's or Munro's afterwards and jam till 3 or 4. And amazing things would happen at Minton's. I don't know if anyone's heard of Minton's. It's where modern jazz is said to have been invented. It's where Charlie Christian would jam with Dizzy Gillespie and some others. And whenever he was in town, Glenn Miller would go to Minton's and take as many of his band as he could, because he said, it's going this way, it's beautiful, we need to check it out. And I often think if Miller had survived the war, he'd have had a band pretty much like Woody Herman's or Kenton's. I think he'd have had a big modern one. So yeah. Bored myself.
I think we'll give you a drink.
Would you?
I think we're all ready. Is anybody? There was no last questions. Thank you so much. Thank you to Martin and to Pete for I know a lot of you are very seasoned Lindy Hoppers, so I'm only offering a taster taster class if anyone wants to warm up. We'll do it over there because I've got some music over there, which leaves the bar really nice and clear over here. Who wants to have a drink and a chat?